11 minutes past 5 now. How to save the euro. Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, made clear yesterday that in her view it'll require stricter fiscal union within the Eurozone. We need budget discipline and effective crisis management mechanisms, she said, and added, so we need to change the treaties or create new treaties. Would that be a treaty just between the 17 Eurozone countries as she would like, or the French would like, or across the entire EU? And what might it mean for Britain? Well, Conservative MPs want the Prime Minister to insist on the return of powers from Brussels as the price for any British consent to change in the treaties. Yesterday, though, Mr Cameron made clear that the UK's first priority should be to help solve the crisis in the Eurozone, rather than talking about repatriating powers from Brussels to Britain. All of this to be discussed further at next week's Brussels summit, but let's get the view now from two people who do take different positions on the euro: the Liberal Democrat member of the European Parliament, Chris Davies, and the Conservative MP, Mark Reckless. Welcome to you both. Chris Davies, we need to change the treaties or create new treaties, says Mrs Merkel. Some Conservative MPs, as you know, feel that that should prompt a referendum or at least repatriation of powers from Brussels to the UK. They've got a point.
We may have to change the treaties, though David Cameron is sceptical about that, and I'd rather take his position. What's absolutely crucial is that the markets have confidence that what Merkel and the 17 Eurozone countries are doing is going to deliver stability. I can't imagine anything more likely to go in exactly the opposite direction than threats of referendums taking place in Ireland and the UK and others, which could, if it goes wrong, could completely destroy the financial markets and lead to hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people losing their jobs.
Let me ask Mark Reckless that then. If David Cameron has made clear the first priority, the greater national interest, is stabilising the euro, he's reluctant to cause upheaval by demanding repatriation of powers now. Would it be sensible to have that sort of showdown with the EU at such a difficult time?
I think it's essential that we have a referendum in this country. I think when we joined the EU, it was a trade-off that we were somehow, we were perhaps giving up some self-government, but in return we would get European prosperity. Now, no one looking at the Eurozone can think that we are benefiting economically from the way that Europe has developed, constraining all these countries into a single currency, which simply cannot work. And I just don't buy the idea that you can stabilise the euros by having a bit of German supervision of other countries' budgets. The fundamental problem is the periphery of Europe is uncompetitive against Germany.
Well, you want a referendum, that's clear, but is this the moment? That's the point that Chris Davies was making.
Well, I think we should have a referendum as soon as possible. But the issue with the euro and the presumption of Chris Davies and others is that somehow this can be sort of patched up. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think we need to see a return to national currencies, and the sooner that happens, the better for our economy and for theirs.
Chris Davies,
Caroline, I hear the Eurosceptics wrapping themselves in a patriotic flag and say we must have a referendum, we must somehow repatriate powers. The big change that is going to take place as a result of the Eurozone crisis is the potential emergence of an inner core of 17 European countries who will be taking many of the decisions that will be affecting us. I mean, David Cameron's number one fight is to ensure that we have a European Union in which Britain has the maximum possible influence. If all we're going to do is squabble with our European partners about the Working Time Directive or the temporary workers directive, and we had 5 hours of debate in the House of Commons about a possible referendum, and those were the only 2 pieces of legislation that were specifically mentioned amongst all the grumbles. If that's all we're going to do, then we're going to alienate the 17, we're going to lose influence, and surely the whole object of the Prime Minister must be to maximise our influence within Europe, not to take it away.
Indeed, but if you do have a moment here, if new treaties are being tabled, the Lisbon Treaty revised, wouldn't David Cameron look weak if he didn't take this opportunity to veto changes and demand more concessions in return for such a treaty change?
I've no doubt he will demand some concessions as part of the negotiations, but he must. I think he also be very much wanting to try and avoid a referendum. Poor old David Cameron, frankly. I mean, he's on a loser whichever way he turns here. He is, one way or another, he's going to upset the Europhobes in his party. But he probably will be able to secure some protection for the City of London from some current financial regulations that are plowing through the system. And he'll probably also be able to get a promise that the Working Time Directive will be revised.
All right, but Mark Reckless, that wouldn't be enough for you, would it?
Well, I think what Chris says is his party leader, the Liberal Democrats, at the manifesto for the general election, said that if there was fundamental change within the EU, then we should have a referendum in this country as to whether or not the British people wanted to stay in the EU on those terms. Now, we've just heard today from Merkel is saying that there's been a new phase. Sarkozy has said that this is a refounding of the EU. With that change, with the Eurozone, whether it falls apart, whether it becomes a fiscal union, there's a huge change for the EU, and the British people must decide, do they want to stay in, or with me, would they prefer to be an independent country, trading with Europe, but governing ourselves?
But a referendum would destabilise the coalition government, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, the Euro's been destabilised by its own structure. I don't think there's any need for a referendum to destabilise the coalition government, because the Liberal Democrats had a manifesto commitment to have such a referendum if there was fundamental change. And as we saw in the debate in Parliament, most Conservatives now also want to have that referendum.
Got to bring it to an end there. Chris Davies, Mark Reckless, thanks very much.